I recently got into Ace Combat 7 after being reminded of how cool jets are by current events.
He needs some milk!
It had been on my Steam wishlist for years and had recently been promoted to the I'm gonna play that someday bin in my actual library. Surprisingly, I did actually make the time to play it and had quite a good time of it. It's nice to be able to fly a cool jet without the man nagging you to kill people and crash the global economy. The graphics are nice, the combat is pretty ace, and I appreciated what is, at heart, a simple mission-based campaign without much substance. And yeah, in the end, the gameplay loop of Ace Combat is very, very simple. Sort of the simplest I can remember playing, in fact. A mission goes like this. First, you choose from a range of pretty interchangeable jets, the most significant difference between them being the one special weapon you can bring with you. As you don't really know what's in the mission beforehand, I generally just brought the same AA missile option every time. Then you load in, and you start shooting things. You do this by flying behind those things and pressing the missile button. If the thing is moving around too much, you press on the air brakes to turn faster and then press the missile button.
コンバット、そのフライトシミュレーターじゃなくて、フライトシューティングっていうジャンルです。エースコンバットのルールってすごく簡単なんですね。ターゲットを敵に合わせて、ボタンを押すっていう基本的にはそういうもので、なので本来は初心者
There aren't really any flight mechanics to contend with. The aircraft all handle like X-wings, with stalling being the only complication. And even then, this feels more like the Erusians are suddenly pulling your nose to the earth with a Looney Tunes-esque horseshoe magnet, rather than an actual matter of fluid dynamics. The worst missions in Ace Combat are those in which you have to take on a single skilled fighter, because the mechanics are so shallow that there's not really much way for Bandai Namco to make the combat any more difficult. You can't really brake harder and fire more missiles than you're already doing for any other slub in a MiG-35, although this is basically what they ask of you, and so the difficult combat constantly feels like a slog. Thankfully, these missions are a minority. Most levels have a couple of unique things to do to spice things up and keep providing you with novelty. The open map score attack missions are especially fun. Even with the simple primary loop, these missions introduce some secondary mechanics by asking you to be very efficient with your gameplay to pass a given score within a given time limit. Unlike the air superiority missions, you actually end up interacting with the huge map, because you usually have to contend with ground or sea units as well as enemy pilots, and so you get some use out of the terrain as well as the skybox. The end of Ace Combat 7 was quite disappointing, with several boss fight missions in a row and a story that completely fell apart after the murder of an actual cardboard dog. Nonetheless, I did quite enjoy it and would recommend it for its common sale price of about €10. And above all, I liked the message. The military-industrial complex is pretty cool, and war is hell, but it is pretty cool too. So I started sniffing around another flight game which I'd known about for a while, but which I'd never been Neumann-pilled enough to play. Nuclear Option is much closer to a flight sim than Ace Combat, but the ways in which this manifested surprised me greatly. For one thing, I assumed a heightened focus on realism would come with less of a focus on game mechanics, but this isn't the case at all. It's a sim in that it simulates things like aerodynamics and heat signatures, and even the phase of the moon apparently. But actually, it ends up being much more of a game than Ace Combat's mechanics could ever manage to sustain. First, the story. The year is 2070 and war is still a pretty fun time. The nuclear taboo has been lifted and people are wondering what the big deal was in the first place. That's about it. There are several game modes, but the most representative is the Conquest type mode, Escalation. Here you join as a rank 0 noob, with access to only lightweight recon aircraft and a small loan of $45 million. They're Aussie dollars though, so don't get too excited.
Crazy old bastards from down the road come and shoot at us pretty much. Yeah.
Eventually, you'll become a level 99 nuclear mob boss, but to get there you'll have to put in the work. The goal is to conquer all of the enemy's air bases, but you don't generally do this by yourself. Rather, you're the aerial component of what is also a ground and sea war waged by hundreds of NPCs. You help out by doing all sorts of things: engaging enemy aircraft, bombing convoys, bombing the buildings that form the supply chains to produce those convoys, delivering AA equipment to the front, scanning for TV license offenders, door calls for people who made mean tweets. The list goes on. Depending on what mission you set for yourself, your experience will range between Boscali Truck Simulator and Ryanair Icarica, although the latter usually means you've taken a wrong turn. As you do these things, you'll rank up and make some money, which gives you access to the higher tier airframes and armaments. The war escalates as more advanced weapons are brought in, including, of course, the nukes.
The stretched twig of peace is at melting point. People here are literally bursting with war.
But I'll talk about those in a moment. The dynamics of a game of nuclear option are incredibly complex, but the genius is that they all roll together and keep things interesting. Like in a real war zone, the thousands of variables on the map determine what you can and can't, should and shouldn't do, such that even a Corvette moving into position 40 kilometers away can result in a completely new combat scenario.
Infrared bullshit, fucking shitting all over my balls.
Your environment effectively defines the space in which you can operate. Your job is then to widen that space by flying around and shooting things, but always by doing so cleverly. Let me give you an example. In Ace Combat, you have the absolute freedom of the deep blue skies. In Nuclear Option, you can't fly above 50 meters in the skirmisher without hearing fire. So, you calmly land your vehicle and choose an Ifrit. You detach everything from the wings to reduce your radar cross-section. You'll need to fly high for this job, so there's no hiding in the ground cloud. You load your inner weapon bays with 1.5 kiloton nukes and small bombs. You take off, turn off your radar, get to about 12,000 meters, and head in the direction of those pesky AA launchers. Once you're right above them, you dip your nose and wait until the HUD displays an 8-second time of flight for your nukes, because you need to drop them late for the element of surprise, but this is how long they take to arm. You throw your nukes and all your smaller munitions towards the site. Because the AA can't distinguish between the nukes and the normal bombs, they just try to intercept them all. But you just need one nuke to get through. You bank away and pray. With several IR missiles now on your tail, you're forced to throttle down to reduce your heat signature and throw out flares. The result of your sortie will be up to many things. Have other aircraft or ground troops softened up this position? Are the enemy's logistics keeping the position sufficiently well armed? Were you spotted early, or did you maintain the element of surprise? All the high-level strategy rolls together and makes the difference between you stumbling home with your tail between your legs and those nukes were 1.5 kilotons. The biggest are 250. The scariest though are the 20 kiloton pile drivers, which arc up to the boundary of space and slam down on their targets several minutes later at several times the speed of sound. It's a genuinely haunting sight when dozens of these are fired off by secret artillery sites once strategic weapons are authorized. But none of these nuclear options are the brute force option. They're the culmination of the game's strategy. Sure, they're very powerful if they go off, but actually firing a pile driver and having it hit is far from trivial. They cost a lot, there's a limited supply of warheads per team, with its own supply chain, of course, and an interceptor with a few radar missiles can turn them into space debris. But when they do land, it's a fantastic climax to everything you've done so far. It really does deliver on the fantasy of nuclear holocaust, you sick fuck. You don't get this sort of payoff in Ace Combat, but I do have to be grateful that it acted as a gateway to these sorts of games, albeit a superficial one. Both games do involve flying, but only in the same way that Ultra Kill and Arma both involve shooting. For Nuclear Option, there's so much more around it that if the Conquest mode would sound interesting for any other mode of transport, then you'll still probably like it here. That said, fine control of your aircraft is still rewarded, and if you are an Ace Combat kind of fella or fellette, then you may like this too. Oh fuck you didn't. I've had plenty of interesting encounters where I've managed to shake off overwhelming odds with a combination of good flying and dodgy tactics, bearing in mind you always have to fly well enough for your dodgy tactics to work. If you're a decent pilot, you may be able to fly yourself in front of the sun to confuse an incoming infrared missile, or make a daring escape from the front lines with one wing, knowing that if you turn too hard you'll rip yourself apart. I remember one time I barely escaped a radar missile by flying down into the nap of the earth. The offending Ifrit, an expensive multi-role fighter, followed me into the hills. But even with my Poundland Harrier, I was able to quickly turn around without pasting myself across the valley, climb back up over the hills, and immediately dispense a cheap IR missile down the gullet of my supersonic op, without the player inside having any chance to react, nor for his last radar missile to turn quickly enough to punish me. These sorts of scenarios happen all the time, and with the sheer amount of stuff on the map and the depth of the simulation, there's not only a lot of restrictions, but a lot of options for you to exploit at any given moment.
Oh, done.
Oh my god.
Holy fuck.
Left engine.
One thing that some people will find especially interesting is the sheer amount of game knowledge that there is to learn. It's never too much that you can't pick up and play. This isn't DCS where you need a wiki to get off the ground. But there is such a variety of units and munitions, which are essentially short-lived and angry units themselves, that there's always a little bit more to understand and apply. For example, Shard corvettes have their point defense on their stern, so it's better to launch anti-radiation missiles at their bow. Airframes like the AC-19 and the Cricket have really cold engines, so you don't need to waste your flares on IR missiles. The Scimitar, the scariest conventional explosive in the game, reaches its top speed after 30 seconds of flight, which means that you want to launch it from far enough away that it's already travelling at Mach 4 before it appears on the radar of the unlucky children's hospital at the other end. In other words, it's a good game for wiki browsing. You can take that however you like, but at least it isn't on fandom. I personally do like the depth, although I would appreciate if the in-game encyclopedia were to be expanded beyond a basic model viewer, and information made better available in-match, possibly even implemented diegetically into the avionics. Crucial information, such as if a given AA vehicle carries infrared or radar-seeking missiles, would drastically improve the new player experience, without them having to tab out. The game also has a surprising amount of the sauce. Take off in any aircraft and that craft's personal theme music will start playing as your gear leave the deck. They're all really good tracks. You've been hearing some as the background to this very video. The graphics aren't necessarily high fidelity, but the whole thing comes out looking very pleasant and clean, with lots of nice atmospheric effects and lighting from flares, missiles and nukes. Even the clutter on the HUD is quite pleasant to look at whilst also being informative. Particularly impressive are the destruction models for each airframe, which are ludicrously detailed. Shockfront Studios made a very nice design choice with this integrated TV in each craft, which can zoom in on any target in a very wide range and give you a nice up-close view of your missiles turning them into smithereens. A sight which I can only compare to dropping a block of halva out of the fridge. One moment it's a nice solid block, and the next it crumbles, and you realise how weak it always was. really makes you think. The near future setting enables this sort of thing. Because the aircraft aren't real, they can have nice and roomy cockpits with integrated TVs and plenty of sightlines, rather than the cramped interiors of even Ace Combat. Being a level removed from reality also means that it's possible to have a finer game balance. If realism was the goal, this sort of huge battle wouldn't be feasible, because even modern warfare doesn't look like this. It looks like a wasp passing through a group of schoolgirls, with the whole incident posted on Telegram 5 minutes later. Nuclear option is not beholden to this. You can have machine gun duels and shred ships with cluster bombs because it's tuned to be fun, not just to match the expectations of glowies posting on the forums. Nuclear option has an interesting path ahead of it. Whilst both factions are currently indistinct, it's expected that the aircraft will eventually be split between them, with each faction getting a unique option for each architect. Given the glowing track record of balance so far, I'm very interested to see how this turns out, any teething issues notwithstanding. There are also new maps planned, with a naval one already added, and the next being a mountainous landlocked map that looks suspiciously familiar. And of course, there's plenty more aircraft to come as well. The game is currently in version 0.33, which means that Shockfront legally has to update it another 67 times before the full release. Hopefully, aside from gameplay updates, they get around to less appreciated friction, like the fact that it's impossible to save hours-long matches, let alone pause multiplayer ones, or the dodgy gamepad calibration. I'd also like a bit more quality of life. For example, I have to unlock my scroll wheel to zoom in enough to resolve individual units on the map, despite the fact that any one of them could ruin my day if they're the wrong sort of AA gun. In this case, it might be nice to have a pop-up which shows all of the units in a given area under the cursor. But, little frustrations aside, the game runs well and is very playable, without any major bugs when you're actually in the air. Any FPS drops you do experience should be taken as an early warning system for the impending nuclear destruction of all you hold dear. Oh my god, my frames.
Oh, Maris got fucking wiped, mate.
Oh, there, yes. Ultimately, I would recommend Ace Combat 7. But get it on sale and be prepared for what is a very simple experience. My advice for enjoying the story is to imagine the whole thing as a cynical prologue to Armored Core 6. Although now that I mention it, just go play Armored Core 6 instead. It did very well, but it's still underrated and managed to be simultaneously stupider and smarter than the AC discussed in this video, besides scratching that same itch for a linear mission-based experience. Despite my soft recommendation, I think it's unhelpful to suggest Ace Combat as a gateway flight game, because it's actually too simple to demonstrate the possibilities of the genre. It only makes sense as an accidental gateway. That's how it worked for me. If you consciously want to get into flight games, play Nuclear Option instead, although personally, I think that this is as far as I'll get with the genre. I don't like Nuclear Option because it's a flight game. I just like it because it's a good game regardless of genre, which I don't think is necessarily true of Ace Combat 7. And so, if you're not necessarily looking for flight narcotics, but just want a game that you can sink your teeth into, or that will facilitate some hopping into Discord with the boys, you really should pick it up. Thanks for watching. Obviously, this is the first post on this channel in a very long time, and I don't think that's actually going to change anytime soon. The main problem at the moment is that I've switched entirely from Windows to Linux, and it's difficult to find video editing software in particular that works on Linux, even though gaming itself is completely fine. Until then, like the video, leave a comment, and see you next time.